Okay, picking back up where we left off, so style and objective of a tragedy. I already talked about the elevated style and the tragic way of life. Another part is that is the purpose. Again, that's the objective part, is to arise pity and fear out of the audience. So the audience should feel pity and fear. Feel pity for the hero that has fallen and fearful of a world in which it can happen. Moving over to the kind of classic characteristics of a tragic hero. Again, this is all shifted and there are more complete lists, but these are kind of like the common aspects that you can find. The protagonist in the tragedy is going to be your tragic hero. This tragic hero is of higher class, and for some reason, like, his fate is more important. It's more like even society thinks he's more important than the rest of everyone else. The audience is meant to admire this hero figure, and when the hero figure falls into poverty, it's like way out of proportion. It's like extreme destitute, not just, oh, I lost a little bit of money. The tragic hero is actually not perfect, hence that's where we get the tragic flaw and what then precipitates the downfall of the hero. And as I said, kind of a little before, on the admiring, the audience admires this hero, but also relates to the hero for some reason. Might even be the tragic flaw is relatable. So the other genre that I talked about was comedy. So with comedy, you're going to have a protagonist. The plot line for the protagonist is that this character is going to go in the opposite direction of a tragedy. So this protagonist is going to start in sad conditions and not well off, and then go into better conditions. The style is written in low or common style, which is to say it's very easy to understand. It's not complicated. Humor, not overly metaphoric, so it's just more attainable. And the point is to kind of think about what are the possibilities. So human possibility, like what can humans achieve on a very more optimistic tone. So obviously the objective of any comedy is to make you laugh, but it's kind of interesting to analyze, why do we laugh? So you don't just say because it's funny, but like, what prompts us to laugh? Well, you could say that we laugh because we feel superior to whomever something is happening to. So if somebody slips on a banana peel, you kind of laugh because you're thinking, well, I would never do that. I'm not that, silly, etc. So you feel superior in some ways. A lot of people don't like to admit that one, but that is one reason why you might laugh in a scenario. Another reason why you might laugh would be maybe the situation is just so absurd. It's so far out there. It's so absurd. So if anyone reads, it's not a play, but if you ever read Douglas Adams, Douglas Adams does a lot of absurd comedy. Samuel Beckett, a playwright, he does a lot of absurd comedy in a darker sort of way. Another reason why we might laugh is like a coping mechanism. So you're in some sort of uncomfortable situation, and the only mentally, unconsciously thing that you can do to ease this uncomfortable feeling is to laugh. So if you've ever been watching a movie and they made this scenario, like you're just uncomfortable for various reasons. You could be uncomfortable just because you don't know if you should laugh or not, or you feel bad, but then you don't. So you're in this middle zone. Then it might be that you laugh because of that. I like to think of Napoleon Dynamite, that movie, but then that's a little dated. You might not know it. You might laugh for peer pressure because you don't want to be the only person not laughing, right? If you've ever been in a scenario and you just start laughing because everyone else is, because you don't want to be the only person who didn't get the joke. Laughter. So you laugh to denounce unacceptable social behavior. So this is also a technique in a society. We don't know it, we unconsciously do it to kind of laugh at it, to say, hey, that's not something that we want everyone doing. So we laugh to demean it, in other words. And the last one is Schadenfreude, which is just to say we laugh because we're enjoying somebody else's misery. Again, a lot of people might not want to admit that one. But certainly, if you've seen those movies, Jackass or anything, spin off from that, that's the concept right there. Okay, so a couple more genres that I want to add to the previous two that I listed, and again, there are many, many more, would be what's called the dark comedy. So a dark comedy is when you get like this sarcastic glimpse into how futile life is. So it's like this sarcastic look at the fact that no matter what you do, you're always going to be on the bottom, and then it's funny and we laugh at it, but at the same time, you're also kind of, it makes you want to cry. So it's a half cry, half laugh sort of a thing, because it is pretty depressing. Okay. And the other one is a farce. So a farce is like that exaggerated, improbable situations and slapstick action. So the Three Stooges, right? So the Three Stooges would be a farce or something similar to that. So I do want to get some terminology exclusive to the drama section, which would be obviously there. It's spoken aloud, so we want to look at speech types, or even if we're reading it from a book, there are cues in there to let us know that something is dialogue versus a soliloquy versus an aside, right? So dialogue is going to be two or more characters speaking. A monologue is just one person speaking. And that could be with other people on stage, right? So a monologue, you could have somebody delivering a speech on stage to other characters who are just listening and they aren't talking. That would be a monologue. A soliloquy is a little different. It's similar to a monologue, except for the fact that with a soliloquy, no one's on stage. It's just the character speaking to the audience or speaking to him or herself, right? And the implication is the audience is kind of being able to listen in on the character's thoughts, even though the character is speaking it out loud. Then there's the aside, which is closely related to the soliloquy. Again, an aside, like a soliloquy, is meant for the audience to hear it and not the other characters. But with an aside, you will have other characters on stage. So to create the aside effect, the actor might, instead of looking at the other character on stage, the actor might look directly at the audience and say something. And so we're like, oh, okay, we're in on that. That person is talking to us, and it's not necessarily meant to be heard by the other character. When you're reading a play, it'll literally say the word aside. So you'll know it's an aside, because that cues us as readers to know what's going on, because we don't have it in front of us in a visual format. Okay, and I say that, and I say I want you to know this terminology because a lot of the other terminology we've already learned, which is nice, right? It makes it easy. So playwrights attempt to make a serious statement about how we live as individuals and as members of a society. So there's argumentation in plays. They are trying to argue something or many things. That said, I want you to use a lot of the same character terminology that you learned in the fiction section, so you might need to go back to your notes. I would like you to look at the same kind of style, figures of speech, as fiction and poetry. So maybe looking for allusions and similes and metaphors, symbols, etc., personification, all that jazz. So you do want to go ahead and look for the same figures of speech, and that applies to style. Stage setting is going to be the same as fiction, so you're going to be looking at, where are we globally, what time frame are we, what's the feeling or the atmosphere, what's the weather. But in addition to that, stage setting also includes the fact that there are now going to be props, and you'll be told that in the stage directions, and the stage directions are given in italics. So because we're reading it instead of watching it, usually most plays when they are published, they'll have italicized stage directions, and in that it'll say, and there's this item over here, there's a table over there, and then that's a prop, right? A physical object that the character is going to be using or moving around or creates the scene. As I said, theme. So theme is going to be the same as fiction. So it's still that concept of making an argument, and then the speech types is the last of the dramatic elements. Okay, that's it. All right, we're at the end of our drama PowerPoint. Let's start applying all of this terminology to the plays that we're going to be reading for this class.